Well, it's the end of the week now and I'm driving north again on the A39 right now. So I don't know, maybe I'll make a few videos. It ended up like on the way down at the beginning of this week, I ended up making over an hour of video. So if anybody has the patience to sit through the whole of that, well done and congratulations. But I don't know, we'll just see. Anyhow, that'll do for now. Just think of what it's like to be in contact with the external world. I suppose I'm trying to think into ideas to do with attention, but I need to think about relationships to the external world first. Because we have this thing called perception, don't we? You know, when we experience the world. I'm looking out through this car windscreen and I'm seeing the sign for Bodmin and Newquay and Trispan St Erm and all the houses and the bushes and stuff around me, the sky above me and stuff, and the cars in my rear view mirror. So I'm having all this seeing thing going on. But I think there's something more primal than that, isn't there? You know, something more, something that isn't as conscious as seeing, or doesn't constitute consciousness in the way that seeing does. Something that's much more possibly automated, but certainly more rudimentary. I guess the kind of things you would find in simpler animals, but are surely just as present in us. And I suppose I was trying to think about light and seeing, vision, but I can't quite get to that. So now I'm thinking about heat. Because you feel heat on the surface of your body, don't you? And if it's uncomfortable, you move. But I think there's something else going on there. I think there's a much more fundamental connection there. Like, for example, if I'm sitting in a room, you know, there's a fire in the room. Well, obviously I know which side of my body the fire is at, because I can feel the warmth if I bring my attention to bear on that, or if my attention is unwittingly brought to bear on that. I know which side of my body the heat's at. But even without me bringing attention to it, my body is doing stuff in relation to the heat. You know, I mean, occasionally I might think, oh, I'm getting a bit warm on this side of my body, I'm going to move, you know, so I'll readjust myself. But most of the time, it doesn't even begin to touch consciousness. You know, there's not even a suggestion of that going on. I'm just moving, you know, I just move in relation to the heat. Like there's a connection between the heat source and my body is kind of in lockstep with it, you know what I mean? Almost like a mechanical connection, just where my body is just adjusting itself in relation to that heat. And of course sometimes I would, as I say, want to take control of that and decide to move consciously, but most of the time I don't think it is. And I think that's what it must be like for simpler animals that don't have those kind of cognitive processes that result in consciousness, that we call consciousness. You know, I think if you're a simpler animal and you have heat receptors, and those heat receptors are there to give you survival value, which presumably they are, you know, stop you burning or freezing, then your body, whatever that body was, would just adjust it, if it was capable of adjusting its position, which I assume it is. It would just adjust its position to optimise the relationship between itself, its body, and the heat source, wouldn't it? I mean, we would just do it automatically, and many animals do that, you know. Oh, the light source, indeed. This is where I guess I'm thinking about light. You know, some animals have got what I don't know what you call them, really, light detecting patches of skin, something like that. They're kind of precursors to eyes, perhaps, but they're just patches of skin which are sensitive to light. And that must be a little bit like having being sensitive to heat in the way that we are, you know. An animal that's got a sensitive patch, a light sensitive patch, would respond to light. It wouldn't think about it. It wouldn't think, oh, it's getting a bit bright in here, I better change my position. Oh, that's interesting, now where that light's coming from, I'll go and have a look at that. It doesn't do any of that kind of thing. I think there must be a kind of almost mechanical, well, it is mechanical, isn't it, connection? Mechanical, electrochemical connection between the animal and the light source, you know, so that it moves towards the light, or it shuns the light, or something like that, you know what I mean? Or it finds an optimal light level, you know, by, I don't know, just constantly monitoring the light that's falling on this sensitive patch. Roundabout, wasn't anticipating this roundabout, sorry about this. Never mind. So yeah, so I guess without consciousness, which is this great second chamber that separates us in some ways, or feels like it does, there'd just be this quasi-mechanical connection. As mechanical as sunflowers turning, you know what I mean? They haven't even got light-sensitive patches, I don't think. I don't know how they work. But it's purely biochemical, isn't it? There's electromagnetic radiation, causes biochemical changes in the plant stem, and it has the effect of turning the face of the sunflower to face the sun the whole time. It's, as I say, it's purely biochemical. You don't need a central nervous system or a brain or anything to do that. Or muscles even, it just happens at the level of biochemistry. Fascinating, all that. There's a hawk in the sky over there. Yeah. I fell in love with an alien being whose skin was jelly, whose teeth was green. She had the big bug eyes and the death ray glare, feet like water wings, purple hair. I was over the moon, asked her back to my place, then I married the monster from outer space. Our days were numbered, our nights were spent in a rent-free furnished oxygen tent where a cyborg chef served up moonbeams, cooked super rapid on a laser beam. I needed nutrition to keep up the pace when I married the monster from outer space. We walked out tentacle in hand. You could sense that the earthlings wouldn't understand. They go nudge, nudge when we got off the bus saying, it's extraterrestrial, not like us. I mean, it's bad enough with another race, but fuck me, a monster from outer space. In a fit of cybernetic rage, she pissed off to another age. Now she lives in 1999 with her new boyfriend, a blob of slime. Each time I see a translucent face, I remember the monster from outer space. I've just seen by the side of the road a crow and a magpie picking at the carcass of a dead pheasant. Just driving across Bodmin Moor right now on the A30. It's pretty gorgeous up here actually. I love this kind of territory, this kind of landscape, you know, very flat, high landscape. Bodmin. There's supposed to be what's called the Beast of Bodmin up here, which is like a black panther. When I say there's supposed to be a beast up here, I mean there isn't a beast up here. But there's supposed to be. You know, it's one of those, what do they call it, cryptozoology things. Hi there, Gary. A couple of minutes to amend them. Hi there, mate. How are you doing? I'm still on the A30 driving north. I watched the first couple of minutes of your recording of your stick-arm thing. I don't want to do the stick-arm thing. I just don't have the right. I don't know. It's just not something I think I can do really. And the timing's all wrong anyway. And I've never actually watched a recording of it until this week. And I watched the first few minutes of the first bit of it. You know what I mean? But it's just you and some other guy on there. Actually, there's something quite interesting on there. I think he asked you, this lad, I don't know who he was. He said, when was the last time you ate meat? And you said it was about a week ago, I had some chicken soup. I don't know, maybe you were joking or something. But I was a bit surprised by that actually. I thought, fucking hell, I didn't think you ate meat, I knew you ate fish. And I was very tempted to make a video about it actually, saying something about, oh, I don't know, I had this idea going that, you know, that a person should only be as vehement about any particular idea as they are willing to, you know, sacrifice their pleasure, comfort or lives for that idea. I don't know, I'm not sure it makes any sense, but I had something going like that. So I was going to say something like, you know, you've only got the right to bollock people for being meat eaters if you're really, really strict vegetarian. And if you had a chicken soup a week ago, then you're not. So, but I don't think it holds much water actually. I even had a good title for it. I was going to call it Chicken Soup for the Soul, but before the word soul I was going to put in brackets the word ass. So it said Chicken Soup for the Asshole. See what I did with that? Really funny that, isn't it? But I didn't. I mean, the reason why I didn't, part of it's boring, and I didn't really want to get into a fucking meat conversation again, you know, because I've had a lot of meat conversations recently, is, well, several reasons actually. One is to do with why the fucking hell out of all the things, the meaty things you can have, you would choose chicken soup. It's, let's face it, it's really fucking boring, you know, really boring. And if you're going to break a vegetarian, let me depersonalise this. if I was going to break my vegetarianism, it certainly wouldn't be for chicken soup, you know, which is just really dull, and it's barely even feels like meat. You know what I mean? I mean, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it. It seems to me. So it would probably be some piece of well-hung venison, or a piece of you know, some game bird or something like that, something relatively exotic, or a bacon sandwich. You know, you can't go wrong with a bacon sandwich, can you really? Or something really weird, actually. That would be, you know, that might be the end. You know, like a pepperami. You know, I don't know if you have pepperamis in the States. They're like these dried sausages. I don't know, they look disgusting, but they're sort of interesting looking things, you know. Or something really weird like dog food. I was thinking about that the other day. I thought, oh yeah, but that dog food is so weird and it's so wrong that would be a good thing to break a vegetarian diet with. But chicken soup I wouldn't do with that. I mean, the other reason I didn't bother making a response to you there, Gary, or just making any kind of comment really, I just thought, what's the fucking point? You know what I mean? There are so many assholes to talk about really in relation to vegetarianism and meat eating. You know, there's so many people who take this weird pride in it. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've come across this. I imagine you probably have. We take this weird pride in it, and it's very similar actually. And I haven't really thought this through, so I don't know how well it stands up. It seems very similar to the kind of pride and self-righteousness that people have about the Second Amendment, you know, the gun stuff that's been discussed recently, and which is obviously alien to me as a UK national. But the things that people say about their right to own guns sound very similar to my ears, at least, to people's right to eat meat. You know, they claim some kind of naturalism, you know what I mean, partly to do with, you know, tradition and all that kind of stuff, and individual rights and rugged individuality. You know, that whole stuff, it just feels like a very parallel kind of argument, and it seems to be spoken by the same, not by the same kinds of people, but the same kind of attitude. You know, you can have my pork chop when you prize it from my cold dead fingers. It's that kind of thing, I think. And people are just wankers about it, you know what I mean? It's like that video that Greytex did, which I think he got a lot of flack for, about how to piss off a lesbian by waving your meat in front of them, when of course he's really talking about how to piss off a vegetarian. It's amazing the number of people who do think it's absolutely fine if you say you're vegetarian to get a piece of meat on the end of a fork and go like this. Weird. It's fucking weird. So yeah, those are the arseholes I'd rather take on than some guy who I assume is doing his best, you know what I mean? So I think we're all doing our best. That's what I think. Yeah, chicken soup. Get rid of the chicken soup, man. Get a tin of dog food. Like that. What film is that? Waterworld, is it? I think it might be Waterworld, where Kevin Costner eats a tin of dog food at the beginning. No, it's not. No, take it back. It's Mad Max. One of the Mad Max films. Yeah. Probably do that. Or a dog. There's a film, I can't remember what it's called now. It's a prisoner of war film, where there's this group of people. It's a Japanese prisoner of war film, I think, and for some reason one of these people's got a dog, and somebody kills the dog and cooks it, and they all eat it without telling the guy whose dog it is, of course. Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, that's kind of worth, if you're going to be transgressive about breaking vegetarianism, then go for it. Eat a dog, or your own kind. I did think about doing this. This is probably going to alarm people, don't mind. I did think about making some black puddings with my own blood. I don't know if you know what black puddings are in the States, but black puddings are a delicacy that you get in Lancashire and different parts of the UK, which are largely made of pig's blood and suet, which is pig's fat or animal fat. And I thought it'd be quite nice to get liposuctioned, so I can get some fat out of my body, and then drain some blood off, you know, which is relatively easy. Keep some of that, and then make a human black pudding, and then eat it. That'd be good, wouldn't it? Yeah, that'd be really good. Anyhow, that's why I didn't make the video to you, Gary, and I'm not holding you accountable, or indeed anybody accountable for what they eat. You can do what the fuck you like. There I am. 7. Yeah, this Second Amendment thing, which obviously we don't have in the UK, the right to bear arms, something like that. I mean, I was thinking about that in terms of cameras. I can't remember what the quotation exactly is, you know, what it exactly says in this Second Amendment to the Constitution. But it says something like a well-regulated militia being something like necessary for the security of the state. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed or something. Is that right? Anyway, I put a version of that on my channel page, substituting 1 or 2 words, so it says something like well-regulated surveillance being, whoops, dog's being sick, well-regulated surveillance being necessary for the security of the state, of a free state. The right to keep and bear cameras should not be infringed. I guess I'm thinking about this transparent society stuff that I've talked about before, you know, the David Brain thing, but also other bits and stuff as well, you know. And what's sometimes called surveillance, S-O-U-S, valence, as opposed to surveillance. Surveillance comes from the French, which means to look from above, or oversight, you know, that kind of thing, whereas surveillance perverts that into looking from beneath. Su means underneath, beneath. So the view from beneath. The idea being that you know, an effective society isn't just about having an effective modern mediatised society I'm talking about, you know, one in which we're all subject to and at least partly occupy pervasive media. You know, an effective society that has that as part of its infrastructure shouldn't just be surveilled from the top, it should be surveilled from underneath as well. You know, we should be watching the watchers, so to speak. And you know, and some of this stuff that we're doing here is clearly part of it, but also, of course, WikiLeaks, which is all about making available surveillance, the underview as well as the overview material. I think it would just help such a lot, you know, if we had that kind of a, if not a right enshrined in constitutional law, at least that as an expectation. Because we're only at the very, very beginnings of that, aren't we, really? Just the very beginnings of the possibilities of what it means to have pervasive surveillance media around us the whole time, and not just around us, but own it ourselves, you know, and express ourselves through it and exist within it. Which, yeah, of course, it's got drawbacks and problems, but at the same time, it's a hell of an opportunity, you know, and I think it'd be a shame just to ignore that, really. Surveillance, the view from the bottom. Yeah, I guess just sorry to whack on a minute, but just in kind of practical terms, you know, having a camera that's on the whole time, or is very readily available, is much more likely, I think, to be a deterrent to crime than having a gun, you know what I mean? Because of course, I mean, they have surveillance cameras in a lot of cities in the UK, and of course there are civil rights issues associated with that. People are justifiably nervous about being surveilled by the authorities the whole time. But I think that's very different when it becomes part of when we own the surveillance technologies, and it's our own, you know what I mean? I know you can get these things for kids now, which are like little camera devices that strap on. These are very small children, and if certain things happen in the environment, like, I don't know, if somebody looms into their view or something, I can't remember what it is, if certain triggers take place in their environment, then it automatically starts recording and, I think, uploads immediately to a server. So you have a track of what your kid's doing. But again, it's obviously there's a kind of civil rights thing going on. But that's something I think would be really useful to have. I mean, if you were walking through a city centre late at night, it can be a bit daunting, you know, I guess particularly if you're a woman, but it'd be pretty scary if you're a bloke sometimes. You know, you are nervous about getting beaten up if you walk past a nightclub at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's just getting out. And having a gun in your pocket or a knife in your pocket doesn't really help. But I think if you have a camera here, you know, and a little sign on it, or just it's recognisable for what it is, you know, so that everybody who comes within range of you knows that every move they make is being recorded and is being uploaded live to some, you know, it wouldn't be made public necessarily straight away, but it would be made, it would be documented somewhere, so everything they do is ultimately accountable. You know, I think that would be a hell of a disincentive to you know, commit any kind of criminal offence. You know, or if you broke into someone's house, you know what I mean, and a guy standing there with a webcam pointing at you, you know what I mean, you just know it's streaming live to YouTube. You'd probably think twice about hitting the guy with a hammer or raping his wife, wouldn't you? You know, probably, unless you wanted to be a Star Wars kid or something like that. But you know, you probably wouldn't want to do that. Yeah. Well-regulated surveillance being necessary for the security of a free state. The right of people to keep and bear cameras will not be infringed. Maybe. Jesus, look at my fucking hair. Look at it, look like Tommy Cooper. Fuck's sake. On the M5 now heading north. I'm just thinking about conversation. Because I always think of YouTube as a conversation, really. That's the metaphor, I guess it is, that I go into it with, or that's the paradigm, the model I go into it with. And I know I'm not the only one, you know, Piro 314 has mentioned it as a public conversation a few times. I watched a video by Ancient Atheist and he referred to it as a conversation. I just think it's the best way of looking at it. It's the most all-embracing kind of term, really. I don't like debate or dialogue, really. I think conversation is better. But I was thinking about that in relation to the history of conversation. You know, because I think, not just YouTube, although that's what I'm interested in right now, but I think social media generally has had a huge impact on the concept of conversation and in human communication, and will have enormous impact in the future. And I kind of wish more people were thinking about it, talking about it, really. People know more than me, basically. But, you know, because conversations obviously happened a long time, and I guess it's kind of happened before Homo sapiens were around. You know, Neanderthals had some kind of a conversation. I read some, I think it was Steve Mithin, I think he's called. He wrote a book called Singing Neanderthals, where he talks about language of Neanderthals coming out of song. You know, that they're singing first off. I don't know why you would sing, but they were singing for some reason. And conversation comes out of that. But if it wasn't that, it would come out of some other kind of conversational, proto-conversational form, like, I don't know, like grunts, you know, like warning grunts. One person grunts and the other person grunts, and there's some kind of agreement of grunting. Or perhaps of alarm cries, you know, an alarm signal, alarm call that some animal makes, and then there's a response, you know what I mean? So it's like a call and response that you get in conversation, or a mating call and mating response, you know. So lots of this kind of call and response stuff going on, I would imagine, first. And then, of course, with our abilities as humans with enlarged prefrontal cortexes and all that comes with that, we make a very kind of baroque architecture out of those basic call and response reflexes until it becomes sort of tents on the hill over here. So it becomes possible to have the kind of conversations that we've had since we were sapient, I guess. But again, you know, that conversation which continues, which I guess, you know, started in the Stone Age or before the Stone Age, started with our ancestors, and has continued. I think there's been distinct moments in the history of the human race, initially biological moments, but now technological moments, which have just done something very specific and very significant to that conversation and affected it in ways which are just radical, you know. I mean, obviously the ability to, you know, the gradual development of equipment for modulating that conversation in terms of, you know, how we speak is important. Because we're one of the only animals that's got breath control to allow us to do these things that we do with our breaths, with our words. You know, most animals don't have that. They can just grunt on the way out, that's it. You know, they can breathe fast or breathe slow, and that's it. They can't modulate their breath the way that we can. So just little biological technological advances like that, you know, and development to the tongue and soft palate has allowed it to do that. But also the brain architecture, of course, which is the most important thing, I guess, which has allowed us to process that and make that conversation possible, and allowed us to make it baroque and enriched in the way that it is for us now. And then, you know, the stabilisation of formal languages after a while. Like, I don't know how that came about, but at some point they became kind of stable, didn't they? And language communities form around that. That must have been a really significant moment in the just in the development of what it is to be human and what it is to live with other humans. You know, to suddenly have this shared language and the possibility, of course, for difference of language. You know, to speak in a way which is different to the exact same species of creature that lives 50 miles away or 20 miles away. I mean, that's bizarre. I mean, some animals have accents. Apparently seagulls have accents. But that's so different to this weird Tower of Babel thing that's happened to us, isn't it? You know, where we just need to be separated for a few years and a few miles and we can no longer understand each other, really. That's terribly significant. And then the ability to write things down. You know, I know Corey, Professor Anton, you've talked a lot about this, and I imagine written quite a bit about this. You know, what happens when you alphabeticize language and write it, or not even alphabeticize it necessarily, but certainly inscribe it. It could be hieroglyphically inscribed, couldn't it? But inscribe it and give it some permanence, extend it beyond the ephemeral moment of its performance. I mean, that's significant. I mean, that makes a huge change to performance, to the performance of a conversation. You know, because these objects, these tablets or hides or papyruses or whatever they are, pieces of paper, suddenly become circulated and they enter the loop of conversation, don't they? And persist beyond it in a weird way. And then it changes again, doesn't it, I guess, with print technology. Because that disseminates. I missed out on that whole alphabet thing. I don't know enough about that. But the print technology, which allows a dissemination of that, is again enormously significant. There's a hot air balloon over there. Now, I always find it quite nice that I think I'm right in saying this, but Geoffrey Chaucer died in the same year that William Caxton was born. You know, Geoffrey Chaucer, a great writer and poet, but you know, living through the age of script, copying by script, giving way to Caxton, the inventor of the printing press. You know, I just think that's a fantastic little watershed. You know, so that just changes again. You know, as the conversation starts to include the technology of reproduction and the technology of mass circulation. I just think that's fantastic. And again, as I say, the conversation and the people who are having the conversations and what's expected of those people in those conversations must change when that takes place, I would guess. And then it changes again, doesn't it? You know, when you start to get other technologies kicking in. And I'm particularly thinking about recording technologies here. You know, when the phonogram gets invented. That was fantastic, I think, that. You know, so conversations start to, you know, the orality of conversation, the spoken nature of conversation starts to come back. And but has something of the permanence of inscribed conversations. That's, again, a fascinating moment. And then eventually that leading to tape and videotape and film and so on. But also the technology of broadcasting and communications media, you know, so, and that happened so quick, didn't it? You know, within 100 years, really, within the space of 100 years, you've got recording media, broadcasting media, and communications media all kind of exploding on the scene. You know, so suddenly conversation can happen at a distance, it can happen in different time frames, asynchronously, it can happen, it's no longer ephemeral. You know, and all these things are entering the conversation that's been around. This conversation that's been going on for a million years. Suddenly it's got silicon objects moving through it and pieces of VHS tape moving through it. C90 cassettes moving through it. Fantastic. And now I think, and this is where I guess I'm going with this, you know, I think, and I might be completely wrong here, I think social media is another one of those. You know, I think we're entering another one of those moments when a new player enters the game, a new piece of technology allows conversation to take different form. You know, and in a way it is a return to oral culture. You know, in the same way that recording allowed orality, if that's the right word, to resurface as a respectable means, because it's not ephemeral, you know, anymore. So I think orality returns here. You know, all these YouTube videos and other, you know, other kinds of media, social media, you know, the oral culture comes back, but it comes back charged with non-ephemerality. You know, we say things and they stay around. It's charged with asynchronicity, so we're not bound to the space and time of our utterances. You know, you don't have to be in the same room as me to hear what I'm saying. You can be dead. I can be dead by the time you're hearing this, but you're still hearing it. You know, and the conversation can continue in my absence. I don't suppose it will, but you know what I mean. I just think it's enormously significant, and the fact that it's a kind of bottom-up movement. You know, because communication, one-to-one communication, fine. Broadcasting is always top-down, isn't it? It's a one-to-many mechanism, whereas this, of course, social media is a many-to-many, or one-to-many, or many-to-one, or any combination of that. It has the potential for variance on that, and that's just different again, I think. You know, I read this great interview. I can't remember the name of this guy actually. I'll see if I can find a link to it. It was an interview with this guy. I can't even remember his bloody organisation. Sorry. I can't even remember the website now. Oh God! See what happens? Just John, mental blocked, neurons died. But anyway, he was talking about peer-to-peer networks. But a lot of the things he was saying about peer-to-peer networks could equally apply to social media networks. And now, of course, you know, peer-to-peer networks, yes, of course, they were largely used for pirating music and film. Yeah, of course they were, and distributing porn, because it's always the sexual and the illegal acts that move technology forward, isn't it? But ways to circumvent the law and circumvent conventional morals is how things usually seem to start off. But basically, you know, peer-to-peer technology, despite those kind of what you might say as abuses, you know, it does have legitimate uses, and it's about the distribution of material. You know, distribution of material through an interrelated social media network, kind of. And I think the social media that we're involved with, something like YouTube, is doing the same thing with knowledge. And I'm using knowledge in the broadest sense, you know, not just you know, hard science and that kind of stuff, but knowledge in the broadest sense of what you might know. You know, what might be known to you, what secrets are available to you, and that can be as trivial as who said what about who in some stick-am room, or it can be as important as you know, as government scandals, and it can be as important as foreign policy, and it can be as important as whatever you like. You know what I mean? It's all up for grabs, isn't it? And knowledge circulating in that way, just from a bottom-up, asynchronous, non-ephemeral media, is just so important, really, and changes the nature of the conversation again. I guess I'd just like to see more thought given to that. I'd like Corey, if you ever watch this long, boring, rambling video, Professor Anton, I'd like you to take that on a bit if you ever feel up for it, because you're sometimes quite disparaging about YouTube and say how trivial it is, and of course it is. You know, I understand that there's a lot of crap on here, but at the same time, you know, as I say, babies are crap too, but some of them grow up to be quite interesting people. And YouTube is, and social media generally, but YouTube is so small right now. You know, it's tiny little thing. It's tiny little thing. It's like, I don't know, I read somewhere recently, it's probably old information by now, I read somewhere that something like 37 hours of video are being uploaded to YouTube every minute. I think that's right, 37 hours a minute. Which sounds like a huge amount, you know, but that's just the equivalent of less than 1,500 people turning their webcams on and leaving them on 24 hours a day. That's all it is. Small village decides to record what it's thinking about 24 hours a day. That's all it is. It's nothing at all. Small village. You know, we're all in this tiny little village. You know, no wonder we can hardly find anybody to talk to, and get pissed off when the people we would have liked to have talked to aren't talking to us in the way we want to talk to. You know, it's no wonder. It's early days yet, isn't it? You know what I mean? I mean, imagine what it'll be like when this is the norm. You know, when this is the norm, when everybody is doing this, when everything is on here. You know, it'll be very different. You know, the conversation will differ. Conversation itself will take a new form, and the people who have conversations will be new people, I think. I know it's ridiculously hubristic, but I believe that, I really do. No one really knows where she came from. Yesterday don't matter, now it's gone. La 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 la. For a life where nothing's changed or nothing's lost, who counts the cost? Goodbye, Susie Sunday, who could hang the name on you when you change with every new day? Still I'm gonna miss you. I'm losing light here fast. I like to stop as early as I can, so I'm driving as much daylight as I can, but I can never get back before dark, not this time of year anyway. Shame really. I've got a services coming up, so I'm not sure whether to pull in here or go the extra 17 miles to the next one. I think I'll go the extra 17 miles. Does that give me a chance to talk about attention? So I started talking about attention, I've been thinking about it a little bit more since. Because I made a video about it a couple of weeks ago about the kind of anxiety of attention, basically based on this just something that Thomas Metzinger had said on a video I watched about it. Thomas Metzinger is a kind of philosopher and neuroscientist. I don't know what he is, neurophilosopher, let's call him that. And he just made this remark that attention is a much more fragile thing now than it used to be, because we live in such a mediated society, I guess, and a society that's so good at providing distractions for itself, you know. Every street and shop window and amusement arcade and television screen is just like calling out to us the whole time. You know, we're very, very good at being distracted and developing the technologies of distraction that is claiming that we've got barely any control over our attention anymore. You know, it's much harder to put your attention on something and leave it there and sustain it. You know, just directing and sustaining attention is harder, you know. I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but it certainly seems to be in terms of my students. You know, trying to get them to sit still for half an hour is really hard. You know, they're constantly wandering off or checking their phones or doing something. So maybe it is that they're, you know, they're constantly being hailed by this plethora of discourses. If I want to put it in a fancy way. Yeah, but you know, there's always something calling out for your eyeballs. You know, you very rarely get the opportunity just to like cut the links and just let your eyeballs rest. Or, you know, power them from behind, thinking, okay, I'm going to look at this object now, you know. So it's I was thinking about that really, I suppose. Which is fascinating, because in a way, I suppose that ability that we may or may not have to control our attention, to direct it where we want it, and then hold it there, and kind of resist the temptations, resist the appeals that are made for other demands on our attention. The ability to do that is quite a luxury, I think, isn't it? And probably a relatively recent development in animal minds, animal cognitive abilities. You know, because it seems to me that, I think as I talked about this in the previous video, you know, it would be perfectly adequate, I would have thought, for the most part, for a creature to just simply respond to the demands of an attention economy, you know what I mean? Like if I'm like if I'm a sunflower, I was talking about sunflowers before, if I'm a sunflower, it makes perfect sense for its attention, if I can call it that, to move with the light, you know what I mean? Then there doesn't need to be any reflection and choice and resistance of temptation, you know what I mean? I guess if you had two suns and you had to choose between them, you know, maybe then something would, I don't know. Even then, it doesn't make any sense, you know, you just do that. And similarly with amoeba, you know, when amoeba puts out its little pseudopodia, its alarm, and engulfs a piece of nutrient, It's not thinking about it, it's just a purely reflexive action caused by a kind of diffusion gradient of the substance in the water and the liquid it's suspended in, and it just happens biochemically. And I'm guessing with many animals, simpler animals for sure, it would just be like that. You know, this weird ability that we have to not have call and response, not have the world call to us and our response just follow it, but our ability to reflect upon that and feel as if we've got some control about whether to respond with our attention or not, and perhaps to direct our attention towards things that are not immediately compelling, you know, just to resist the compulsions of those things. I mean, that's phenomenal, really, isn't it? Because without that, there wouldn't be any of this stuff we call seeing, and there wouldn't be any of this stuff we call reflection, and there wouldn't be any of this stuff we call perception, or probably even a perceiver. You know, we wouldn't be orchestra leaders of this orchestra of our minds if it wasn't for the fact that we have some choices about how to play the score. You know, we seem to have some choices. I don't want to bring will into this, that's too complicated. I've never liked that will bloke. But you know, the fact that we or maybe it's just that maybe it's just that we, I don't know, there's something there I'm stretching for, to do with the fact that the hailing that the world is giving us, the shouts that the world is making to us to try to attract our attention. It's not singular, is it? We get a lot of it, and we can kind of feel ourselves grazing across the different shouts. So maybe that's what attention is a bit like. And then we can direct the spotlight. Like, I don't know why I looked there then. Why did I look over there then? Must have been something in the corner of my eye, which means that what my eye was doing then was saccading, because your eyeballs saccade, they like kind of vibrate in various directions, which means that my eye was saccading, and then what will have happened is it will have saccaded a bit more in that direction, because on some subconscious level there was something over there, maybe a light, that was that some part of the subroutines in my brain said that's something which may be significant. You need to check it. And at a certain point it activated some higher processing centres, which just made me turn my head. I didn't think I'm going to look at the light. My attention was just taken there, really. So it isn't just with highly mediated societies and the lure of adverts and television programs and X Factor and YouTube videos about stupid things. It's not just that. The cakes. It isn't just those things. It's the world at large has got us by the eyeballs, hasn't it? It squeezes our eyeballs like that. Squeezes it like George Bataille. Yeah. Camel by the side of the road. Hi there, guy. How you doing, son? Yeah, I'm going to stop in a minute and go for a walk, mate. Okay. Oh, look at that face. I love that face. Brilliant. Go on, lie down. We're going to stop in a minute. I've got services about 5 miles. Yeah, we'll stop there. We'll stop at Bridgewater. Bridgewater services. Dogs. I think this is probably the last film I'll be able to make on here, actually, because it's getting dark. And the picture resolution on this camera, which is a flip camera actually, held onto my steering wheel by a big lump of blue tack. The picture quality really degrades when it gets too dark, when the light levels are too low, so as I say, this will probably be the last bit. I'm sure you're glad to hear that by now. But yeah, I just want to talk about pornography a little bit here, because I've made a couple of videos referring to pornography recently. I made one called Pornography 101, this is about this course I'm supposed to be helping to write at college. Excuse me. But more specifically in relation to what I'm thinking about right now, I've sent off an abstract for a conference presentation on the origins of consciousness in the pornographic imagination. Big flock of birds. And yeah, it's been accepted for this conference in Stockholm, which is great, you know. But someone asked me in the comments, I think it was the comments to the previous driving video actually, whether I'd read an essay by Susie Sunday called The Pornographic Imagination, saying that this person said they assumed I had, since I'd used that phrase, origins of consciousness in The Pornographic Imagination. And I thought, have I actually read that? It doesn't ring a bell, you know what I mean? It doesn't ring a bell. So I went to the library and bought the book out in which it's in, which is this one, Susie Sontag, Styles of Radical Will, from 1967. Essays around that time, which includes the essay The Pornographic Imagination. It's very interesting actually, very interesting. And I still can't quite remember, I think I must have read it actually. I'm saying that because I can't believe I made that phrase up. And particularly since I made that phrase up and I cited George Bataille in the context of this kind of conversation as kind of erotic writer, pornographic writer some might say. And George Bataille is one of the writers that Susie Sontag used as a case study in that essay, The Pornographic Imagination. She's basically trying to argue the case for a certain kind of erotic or pornographic writing, those including George Bataille and 4 other writers, as a valid literary genre. That's kind of what she's talking about there. And it's very interesting, you know, but it's very of its time, I think. I'm gonna have to reread it again because I can't remember all the details about it. But I mean, that was such an interesting time for this discussion about pornography. I'm gonna have to find more out about it for sure, you know. It's around about that time, I think, that what's she called? The woman who wrote The Female Eunuch, Germaine Greer. It's around that time when she started a pornographic magazine called Suck, and she appeared naked in the pages of that magazine. You know, so it was a weird time, really. Generally, I think. And it was a time when, you know, there's lots of civil rights movements of all different kinds. You know, gay rights. Black Power was very big. What else? Obviously, women's rights, feminism was kicking off in a big way. Late 60s. But they're all a bit disconnected actually, all these groups are all a bit disconnected. And they still are terribly disconnected, of course, and lots of internal fragmentation in them. But I think in some ways there was even more of a disconnect between them then, you know. I'm reminded of this comment that somebody made, oh god, it was either Louis Farrakhan or Malcolm X or some, you know, fairly well-known either civil rights leader or Black Power leader, and somebody had asked him, a woman had asked him, you know, what's an appropriate position for women in the Black Power movement, and he's supposed to have said prone, you know, basically on your back, you know, with your legs in the air, which you never get away with saying that kind of thing now, but there was such a disconnect between the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, and the feminist movement. And there still is a bit, you know, but it was so pronounced that you could say something like that without completely losing credibility. And the gay rights movement, wow, I mean, that was just nowhere on the horizon as far as something like Black Power is concerned. And you know, there was lots of, there was just very different conversations. The conversations didn't even overlap to the extent they do now. So when Sontag was writing about the pornographic imagination in 1967, well, she's just writing in a very different time, isn't she, really? It was so hubristic in some ways. You know, the sexual revolutions of the 1960s were so hubristic. You know, because it was before pornography was commodified in the way that it is now, which I do think has changed the landscape of it quite radically. I assume there was things like sex trafficking and a lot of the illegal stuff then, but it wasn't as pronounced or as well known. So I think people in many ways were quite naive about it and what they could say about it. Not quite as naive as I am right now, but you know what I mean. So I think Sontag and Germaine Greer indeed look quite naive by comparison. You know, this is only a few years, I think, just as a point of comparison, this is only a few years after people like Jean-Paul Sartre, you know, one of the, not particularly fond of himself, but certainly one of the best known philosophers, when Jean-Paul Sartre is arguing for paedophilia. He's not arguing for it, is anything, but he's kind of defending paedophilia as an alternative sexual practice. I mean, it's such a naive thing to say, really, isn't it? You know what I mean? And it comes out of a naive time. And I think in some ways Sontag's pornographic imagination has that some kind of a ring to it. But interesting and valid in other ways. I mean, certainly the writers that she's talking about, like Georges Bataille and the rest, I don't think, I mean, it's still quite a difficult read, but I don't think many people would argue the idea that it's literature now, you know. I don't think. Maybe people would. Anyway, it's going dark, the lights are growing dim, all the photons are baring their asses for the big finale. Good night, sweet ladies. Parting is such sweet sorrow. Good night.